Okay, I suppose it's time. Hello, good afternoon. Hi, I'm here. It's time. Time to keep doing stuff. I gotta remember to change the title of these dang things. I'm telling you to stop making up animals. Beautiful. That's the new title. Okay, so today I said I was going to, so I'm actually going to. I have this unit that I have been kind of futzing around with for a little while, and we're at a point right now where it probably would be really good for me to go ahead and actually start painting him. Because it looks like I've done most of him. I think I probably need to go back and do some touch up on the black, but a lot of this unit is done, and all that's really leaving me to do is the actual Space Marines on top. And so what that means is I'm going to go ahead and make Griff and Simmons actually a thing. But first, I think what I actually need to do to start this off is finish up some of the, actually no, I'm just going to use this, finish up some of the little bits of black that I still haven't completely, painted on this guy. Because I can see there's some spots where I missed it, I haven't done parts of the handles. It's all good, it's all fine, but it's just little nitty things that I want to say I've done before I move on and start actually painting the little guys. As you can see, like, the bike handles, not done. There's a little bit of green down in here that I probably should fix up. There's a little bit on the bolters themselves that I can probably fix. Nothing too big, but just enough that if I were to stop and not do these, it would annoy the hell out of me every time I looked at them. So I'm going to go back through and try and hit some of the spots that are very clearly not painted that need to be painted. I know that there's a little bit on the bolter magazine here. Right in there. Some right here that I should probably get. Finish out that framing. I wonder that since this is the suspension, should I just go ahead and do the rest of the suspension in the same color? Because that's what's kind of happened already. Is if you look at the actual Puma, the Warthog in Halo, it's definitely got that going on for it. Is that pretty much all of the suspension going back to the main body is black. So I think I actually will go ahead and make that a reality on this model. Go ahead and give it a little hit right there. Okay, the mic is not picking up the music, that's a good thing. And just give this a little more contrast, because otherwise this is a very solidly like dark green model, and it doesn't need to be entirely dark green, especially when there are clearly black spots on it in the original design. So I'm gonna go ahead and just hit some of those spots right now, help bring a little more contrast to the model, at least where I can and where I can see it, because clearly putting this together before painting it might not have been the best decision. There are spots that I can't reach, or spots that are hard to reach, but given that this is also going to be part of a diorama and not really a painting competition, it's not like it's going to be really noticeable that there are some spots that I just can't hit, because if I can't hit them, you probably can't see them. You know what I mean? So we're just going to go ahead, continue doing that. And what will most likely happen afterwards is I'll give it a quick dry brush with metallic that will make it look a little less cartoony and a little more gritty and realistic. Which I don't know if I really need to go for that on a what's essentially a Halo 1 model that I'm mimicking. But I'm going to do it just for thoroughness sake, you know? That because this is clearly not the Warthog. This is going to be a 40K'd version of the Warthog. Yeah, see, like, that makes sense now, because I went ahead and did that same paint job to the back parts, the back suspension. So it definitely makes sense that the front suspension is going to get the same color scheme, right? Okay, so now that that's good, yeah, that definitely does bring a little bit more pop to it, doesn't it? The only thing I kind of wish is that I had not hit that part with the black, because I do remember that the hubcaps are supposed to have the same kind of green tinting as this, but since I painted that over, it doesn't. And I'm honestly not going to try and replicate this because it was like layers of airbrush, and I can't do that. I'm not good enough to do that with just a straight brush, especially since it's layers of airbrush that were pre-mixed in the airbrush. So I'd be trying to replicate something that has like 3 layers of complexity too many for my liking. Okay, next thing is going to be to get this center console, because if I recall right, the dashboard in the Warthog is also, the Puma is also a black, because they went really hard on that contrast, or that design, that like military design of black and olive drab for the entire model. So I'm going to do something similar. And again, my goal is, hopefully I remain ambitious enough to do so when I actually finish it. My goal is to go ahead and make this thing look like it's leaping over a hill as Church and Tucker kind of scramble and run away. I suppose something else I could do if I wanted to be squirrely is I have a Leman Russ that belonged to a friend who never really got to assemble it or anything. He was painting some Astra Militarum, some Imperial Guardsmen that came with the box, and then quarantine hit, and we really weren't able to hang out. And we really haven't been able to make plans to do so since, and that was years ago at this point. So I think by statute of limitations, that box is now mine. And I've got, I mean, if he really is upset that I did that, I will buy him all of the units myself. I won't be able to get him the exact box because I don't think they print and produce the Start Collecting Imperial Guard box anymore. But at the very least, I will honor the fact that I took his paint, or I took his minis, and I will get him whatever the modern equivalent is. Which clearly is going to end up costing me more, given that the units are always sold at a nice discount in the boxes. But you know what? It is what it is. I am going to try and paint them in his style, though. Except for maybe the tank. Though there is also the option. I have a Station Forge tank, which is a much bigger model. It looks fantastic, though. It very much looks like it was inspired by the Leman Russ. I could paint that up and make it look like Sheila. Though she's closer to like a Baneblade's appearance. But yeah, and I could put like Caboose in there, and we could have even more of the red versus blue experience. Okay. I'm gonna go ahead and water this down a bit, because for my next step, I'm gonna go ahead and get the grading at this guy's feet. And I really honestly don't want it to be too deep a color. And I'm trying to be careful. I'm basically using the black now as a shade to get inside the grading. And I'm just going to try to gently go around this guy's feet and not really make it thick and goopy. And if I do, like I just did, I can always just, water it down. But the goal here is to try and keep it inside the grading, not make a mess like I just did. There we go. And I'll see how far I can get with this method. But yeah, as it turns out, the darn dip wash that I bought was an oil-based dip wash, which is not what I was hoping for. So I ended up having to buy some mineral spirits, which are on the way and should be here tomorrow. And those are just going to have to be used to kind of thin out my Assault Marine models and make them look a little bit closer to what I was hoping they would look like. I guess the good news is I've been kind of vacillating on getting oil paints for a while now, and oil washes, and that kind of pushed me over the edge. I don't really have a choice if I want these models to look any good. So now I'm going to start learning how to do oil paints, which is something I've never done before, and as a hobbyist and a not artist, scares the heck out of me. I suppose we'll find out soon enough. Okay, So the next thing to do is to completely ruin the shade job I did on these guys and turn them different colors. So I'm going to need a second, first of all, to clean up this this paint that I've left in the palette, because I don't need that black anymore. Then it will be to look up who drives what. If I recall properly, Griff is the actual driver. He's the driver, and Simmons is on gunner position. But I'll have to look it up really quick on red versus blue just to see if I'm accurate. So, one moment please as I go over to the internet to check to see how correct or incorrect I am. Let's see. Yep, okay, so it is definitely Griff on the in the driver's seat and Simmons in the Simmons at the gunner position on the back. And Simmons is a dark maroon, and Griff is kind of like a yellowy orange. And actually, let's one moment. There's always a big thing about that. Red versus blue. Griff. What colors do they give him? They say his armor color is orange, and they clearly make it more orange in Halo 5 and in Halo 3. Yeah, in Halo 1, it has kind of a goldish color to it, but we're going to go ahead and do what they say. We're going to go with an orange, and I'm probably going to layer that orange up to a yellow. So we'll see what we can do with this, because I have a couple of those colors readily available. I have this bright orange color from Vallejo Model Color, and I have this gold brown, which works as an orange. Actually, you know what? Even better. We'll switch over to Vallejo Game Color, which is gold yellow. That should work okay, because it's got the orange tint to it. For Simmons, I think what we'll have to do is... How do you make a maroon, actually? I believe it's essentially like maroon... How to make maroon. Paint. Red and brown together generally make up maroon. Make maroon paint using only primary colors. Mix blue into a red base using a 5-to-1 ratio. Once you've darkened the red paint with blue, add a very small amount of yellow to achieve maroon's brownish tinge. Well, I do have a brown, so I can use that instead. Okay. So I guess I'll use Vallejo Game Color Heavy Red and Vallejo Game Color Charred Brown, and that will get us to maroon. Hopefully, maybe. But let's go ahead and try and get Griff first. And I think what I'm going to do before I even do any of that is I'm going to knock Griff down a little bit from this green down to a lighter color using a pale sand, because otherwise it's just going to show right through. His current green tint is going to be a problem. But let's go ahead and see what I can do with this. So I'm going to mix up the orange. And then get it on my palette. I'm probably going to need a lot more than that. And we're going to see if this orange, we're going to test this orange to see how translucent it is. Because generally orange is a very translucent color. Oh, yeah, that's going to be a problem. And you can clearly see that it's not taking very well to the green. So I think what's going to have to happen is we're going to have to go over that with a different color. So, not a problem. Because we don't actually need this next color. And you know what? I'm not even going to use that. I'm going to use Buff. Amarillo Kaki. And we're going to see what we can do with that to see if putting this on Griff's arms will be a little bit better as a base layer to then put the orange on. So we're going to do it on the other side, see how that looks. And actually, that's coverage on that is not bad. I mean, I might have put it on a little thick, but the coverage is definitely not bad. And I apologize if I slaughtered the pronunciation of, or the Spanish pronunciation of this color, but I don't want to be like Amarillo. That seems even more insulting somehow. At least I'm trying the other way, right? Okay. And so even though this is clearly not going to get great coverage either, I mean, you can really see that there's green poking through it. It will act as a really sturdy base layer that I can then paint the orange over, which will then have a much more solid base to go off of, as opposed to painting straight orange onto this green. That's the hope, at least. And look at that, I found some more black that I didn't hit. Go ahead and just check a little bit from here, because I used a very cheap black for most of this. I figured that I didn't need to go into an expensive one, so what then ended up happening was I used more of that apple barrel black. But let's see what we got going on here. Go ahead and mix that in. Get it in there, and now we're right as rain. Looks considerably better. That in there. Put it down here where it looks like I can still see some of the green poking through. There we go. Just do some cleanup. That's good. Okay. The next thing to do is that clearly the orange is starting to dry on his left arm. So I'm going to give it one more layer and see if I really need to do anything else with this. And I'll be honest, even with two thin coats, this is not looking great. I can still see green poking through it, so I'm going to go ahead and stop there. I'll let that dry in a minute, but I'm going to go ahead and paint the rest of him with buff, which is obviously going to brighten him up tremendously, but that's fine. And it is going to undo all of that subtle lighting that I got done through the airbrush, but that's also fine. I really didn't anticipate that staying. That was primarily for the vehicle. But yep, going to go ahead, get all down now. Get everything basically. Get this all into one solid color. Unfortunately, the brush has gotten wet, and the brush tip has gotten wet, and that is causing all sorts of problems with the buff color. Because once it gets hit with water, it kind of disintegrates into its own weird thing. And that makes it very watery and runny, which is not at all what we want. Okay, that's going to be fine. And like I mentioned, we're not trying to get amazing coverage with the buff. We're just trying to get it to a point where when it dries, it will act as a sturdy undercoat for the upcoming colors. Now, I think, just as a fun little in-joke, because they are part of Red Team, I'm going to go ahead and give them red Aquillas. Because clearly the Master Chief chest plate doesn't have an Aquila on it. I don't think it has any decoration on it at all. I can double check real quick, but I'm almost positive that they just have a breastplate. So I'm going to have to take some liberty here because I did not bother to scratch the breastplate off of these models. Okay. Get rid of as much of that green as possible. And again, you don't really have to be absolutely painstaking and beautiful and exact with this. It's mostly going to be covered anyway. But at the very least, you should try not to be too sloppy, because otherwise you're going to start hitting finished parts of the model, and you really don't want to do that. So let's go ahead. Continue coating this model in this light, this warm khaki color. And hopefully it will look good once I get the orange on top of it. And here is why I honestly should have painted the torso separate, because it would have given me room to reach into the young man's lap. Which, as you know from watching Red vs. Blue, is an incredibly dangerous place to be shot in. Okay. It also doesn't help that I'm using an old beat-up brush, but to be honest, I didn't want to waste a good brush doing this kind of rough scut work. So the beat-up old one is going to have to pull most of the weight for this base coat. and then when I go back and do touch-ups, I can go back to using a much nicer brush. But I really kind of don't want to waste the bristles on how roughly I'm using it now. Okay, so let's see if I can angle in here to get like his knees. Because he's got those, of course, the Space Marines have that awkward scalloping on their knees. Well, the new ones do. The old ones did not because they had good design. And of course, I'm being tongue-in-cheek, guys. The new Space Marine designs are fine, I guess. They're just not my thing. I preferred some of the ridiculousness of the original designs. Okay. Okay, I'm gonna redo his helmet since I'm back up here and it looks to have dried competently. There we go. And let's see if I can hit this other leg without causing too much trouble elsewhere. Okay, nope, that's still leg. Good. Everything's looking pretty good so far. I don't even know if you can see it because of how heavy some of the shadows are, but this is all just going to try and hit some parts of the model that aren't going to be incredibly visible to anyone looking at the diorama, but I know they're there, and so I must fix them. We're going to give Simmons fairly equal treatment too. He's going to get a lot of the same kind of TLC to make sure that his colors are nice all over as well. Okay. So while Griff is drying, looking remarkably sickly now because he's got this bone over this like drab green, we're going to go ahead and hit Simmons real quick. And you can see this brush is getting all kinds of messed up. Now, a lot more Simmons is exposed to the world, so this should be a little easier on my end to be able to get good coverage with him without having to finagle, at least not until I get to his legs again. Let's go ahead and get down in there. Now, Simmons is also wearing that dark maroon, so something that will be kind of helpful is that he is going to have a lot of natural shadows built up that I'm not going to have to fight or try and make just because of the color of his base coat. I will say something that kind of miffed me, and this was purely my fault, is that I was looking around on cults and I actually found Halo-style helmets for your Space Marines. And it's like, well, dang, I could have really made this look authentic and given them the proper mark design for their helmets. But that didn't happen, and so they're going to be stuck with what they've got. And they're going to look fine. It was a minor quibble, a minor regret. Now, one thing I will recommend and caution against is what I just did a few moments ago, where I was very vigorously flicking the brush across parts of the model, because you can see on his legs where there's been brush splatter. Unfortunately, I loaded up the brush too much, and so now it's got a lot of liquid, it's got a lot of paint on it, and so if you get too enthusiastic and start really flicking your brush, that's definitely going to create issues down the road because you're going to be flicking paint on potentially finished surfaces. So don't do that. You don't want to. It's bad. It creates more work for you and makes the painting process far less fun because you're now trying to cover up mistakes you've made. It didn't need to be there. Now, something I do think is kind of cool is that very soon I'll actually have some D&D commissions to work on. I've been commissioned by a couple of people to paint some Dungeons and Dragons miniatures, which I haven't done in a while. And it's going to be a far cry from what I'm currently doing, but hopefully I'll be able to make the clients happy. And you guys will get to see me paint something other than Space Marines and Primarchs for once. Because I know it's been a while since I've done something other than those. Okay, so we're gonna hit that in there just a little bit more. And again, this is not meant to be a full coverage coat, just kind of hit everything so that you don't have to worry too much about coverage when you start putting on the next coat of paint or the next base layer. Which in this case, based on what I just read, is going to end up being a mixture of red and brown. I've never made a maroon before. I did not realize there was brown in maroon, and that is very strange to me. But I'm going to trust the internet in this case. And if it doesn't end up working, I'll paint over him and we'll start again. And you can see right there, once again, he's got the paintbrush with way too much moisture in it. And that's definitely causing it to create these weird puddles. Because as both the paint and the moisture are being passed off to the model, it's just leaving concentrated pools of both stuff in there, which is not good. You do not want that. So be careful with the amount of paint you're putting on your brush. Be careful with the amount of moisture you're putting on your brush. Now that is another problem with this buff color, is that, like I said, it kind of disintegrates when you start putting it in water, or putting any kind of water near it. It does not thin down well. And so, anytime I have any moisture near it, that seems to ruin the paint, and I've got to really fight it. At some point, I probably just ought to look up a better color for off-white. Because this was meant to be my warm off-white, but it is, and I've used it a lot for doing skeleton bones and the like, and parchment papers. But it's just constantly come across as a hassle to try and get equal coverage on it before just giving up and hitting it with a wash. You know what I mean? Actually, let's hit these two because they're gonna need a little bit of a coating before I hit them with a color as well. Okay. But actually, you're starting to see it a little more now. My impatience is causing the paint to get flicked all over the front. Thankfully, it's a very minute detail. Most people are probably not going to notice that, but it's not something you want to get in the habit of doing. Because otherwise, it's going to start flicking on too much greater details, and you're going to make yourself work a whole lot harder. So don't do that. Continue working along those, along his legs. Get a little bit more paint on there. By the end of this, Griff should be very, very well set up to put some orange on, and hopefully it will do like I hoped it would. And it will provide a nice base for Griff's orange base coat. Okay, how can I put that in here without being too much of a bother? Sorry you can't really see it because the lighting's bad. I've only got two lights and they're both kind of doing work already. So I went ahead and got his foot. Okay. Go ahead and hit this other leg with more of this paint. And again, this is what is generally known as the ugly stage for painting, where nothing quite looks right, everything's off-colored, everything's sloppy. But if you just keep pushing through it, eventually the ugly stage will transform into whatever you're looking for. You kind of got to have that ugly stage first. Can't always be beautiful, especially if you're a novice painter. And despite the fact that I have a channel that I have made, I am a novice painter. Well, actually, I wouldn't say that. I've been paid for commissions, and people have been very happy with them. So I'm not as doofy as I say I am. Just a little self-deprecating humor is all. Okay. Inside there to get his other part of his knee, get his inner thigh. Yeah. So while his coverage is definitely hideous, he is at least covered. And now I can go back to Griff down here. And I can start trying to clean up Griff a little bit with the proper paint color. So let's see how well this covers now. Oh man, that is night and day. I mean, you can clearly see that the orange is getting far better coverage because it's not having to fight through the green to get there. And that's exactly what we're looking for. I'm still going to do 2 thin coats because you can still see some places where it's too watered down and it's still poking out a bit. But the khaki has done a very good job, the buff, or whatever you want to call it, has done a very good job of disguising most of the green and suppressing it so that the layer that mixes with the khaki ends up being the orange. And that's exactly what we're looking for. That's gonna be goodish for what I want. And what will eventually happen here is I can go back with my second thin coat, as per Duncan Rhodes, and it will create a nice smooth color that I can use as a base layer for his highlights. So hopefully that will be the case soon. Okay. There we go. Yeah, a lot of this will end up getting cleaned up, especially now that I've been over it once with the orange. I'm going to be a lot more cognizant of spots that are not orange, and that will really allow me to hit those spots again on another pass, kind of like his ear and his helmet right now. But something else to remember, and I've talked about this before, is let your paints dry. Don't keep trying to add more because it doesn't look like it's enough, because you're right, it's not enough, but it's the first layer. And the more you try and push your paints around, the more you try and add more to wet paint, the more you're going to push them around. And that's kind of the opposite of what you want, because now you're going to have these weird holes and gaps in the model's paint job, and when you go back to paint over it again, once it dries, you're still going to have those. So it's better to just have a little bit of, I'll call it sloppiness, like too light a coat, so that you can go back over it with a full coat on the second pass, and it will be evenly spaced out, evenly placed, and distributed. That's the word I'm looking for. Evenly distributed, as opposed to having to deal with having these weird light spots because you didn't have the patience to let it dry. So that's kind of what's going to happen with this guy. While he very clearly is translucently orange in a lot of spaces, it's going to be much easier to cover that up if I let him dry than if I keep trying to attack it now. I say as I continue to attack it now. Okay. But yeah, you're getting kind of a live feed of what happens when you are impatient with your brush. At the same time, I need to make sure I'm giving you guys a decent viewpoint of what's going on. hopefully you guys can kind of see what I'm working on, and it's not too much of a mystery. But I'm really, really bad at kind of trying to watch the monitor and watch what I'm doing at the same time. Get in there, get in there, that's good. There, under the feet. There we go. Not perfect. Definitely not perfect. Not the most skilled paint job I've ever done, but one that reads as what I want it to read as. And I can afford to be a little rough with this brush because this one is an older brush. It is more beaten up. I didn't just take this brush out of the packaging and then immediately start destroying it. This one took time for me to get here, and for a while it was a very good detail brush until, you know, it wasn't. And part of that I learned is because what I thought was decent treatment of the brush was in actuality manhandling the darn thing. So it just kind of lost its point. And now it's become more just a large detail brush, well, a medium-sized detail brush. No, medium-sized base brush. Okay. Let's see, can I get that other leg without screwing up too bad? I mean, the good news is that if I do screw it up, I'm surrounded by black, if you know what I mean. A lot of the parts that I'm trying to reach through are black. So black covers up pretty much everything very effectively. So I don't have to panic too much if I get any orange on any of the framing, because the black paint that I use will just do a wonderful job of covering it up, and no one really has to know about it. Like, for example, I don't know if you can see it in here, I just hit this, I just hit a little bit of black inside console. I don't like how that looks. So I'm going to spin some black onto this brush, choose a new angle, and hope to God I can get it. I was able to get something. That's fair. Okay, now that he looks like a wet Cheeto, or one of those wet mac and cheese things, I should be able very soon to go back and get Simmons. And heck, I can even redo his shoulder pads. I don't think I'm getting enough paint on the brush, but as you can see, it's clearly doing a better job covering on that second lap round, or that second attempt than it did on the first one. Oh, probably use fingers too, right? And so what's probably going to happen, especially because I'm using a bad brush with a lot of water in it, is I'm going to have to hit it with a wash. And what that wash will do is it'll dull down all the colors and kind of further unify them, which is exactly what I'm going to want. Okay, so let's go ahead and try and mix together a brown and a red for Simmons. There's heavy red. There's charred brown, which, whoa. Charred brown decided that it needed to explode out of the dropper bottle and put a bunch of it on my cutting board. So we're going to go ahead and pick that up. I think I have a little too close to my vent on my computer, which now it sounds like it's about to blast off. And so it's kind of superheating the paints and causing a little bit of a kerfluffle with air pressure. Stop. The red's doing it. Okay, there we go. I was able to knock back down the red. Now I've got a whole ton of unused red paint that I just know is going to go to waste. So rather than leave it on my paint palette to essentially be washed away later, I'm actually going to open up my my red paint tube, the red paint bottle, and I'm going to scoop a lot of this back up. And this is all going to be off camera, so you guys aren't going to watch me do this. But I really don't want to waste any more of this paint than I need to, because it's kind of expensive. So So there we go. And I can put that back in here. And now you are good to go. Red paint and brown paint. Yeah, I think having these too close to the heat is causing issues. So I'm going to go ahead and put them back now that I've gotten the colors that I need. And I can go back to actively mixing paint and painting this guy. I'm going to hold him up, and I'm going to take some of this, too much of this brown. We're going to make ourselves a maroon. I'll be danged. That's definitely a maroon. It's a very heavy maroon, but it is a maroon nonetheless. Yeah, that color screams Simmons at me. Okay. And again, kind of the good news is this is a crummy brush, so I'm really not overly worried about paint getting in the ferrule or damaging the brush at all. In this case, it is what it is. Okay. Okay. A little bit more brown, mix it in with the red that I've got, make that ridiculously vibrant maroon, and paint you across the entirety of this guy. Unfortunately, that's a much different shade than I want, so what can I do to fix this? Apparently the answer is just add more red. Okay, so I'm going to continue painting him down, and again, especially since this isn't going to be like a professional project paint job, it's all going to get a heavy wash, probably in this case of a red, which will tie all the colors up together a little bit better. Just something that I am noticing right now, and I'm pretty sure anyone in the viewing audience who watches this for more than a second will realize I was pretty heavy-handed with a lot of those brush strokes, and because of that, the brush strokes are showing through tremendously on this mini. Which you really don't want. Unless you're going for a more painterly style, you really don't want to see a lot of brush strokes on a mini. I'm going to mix in some water and see what that does. Probably shows the brush strokes from the previous layer that I did. That's what it'll do. That deep inside his neckline. There we go. Yeah, that might have been a little too wet. Okay. A little bit more. Yeah, that brown really did a lot to turn this into more of like a leathery color, didn't it? Because I think when I add more brown, it dulls it back down. But as I add more red, you get more of this vibrant maroon, which honestly is a really neat looking color. I'm digging the maroon a lot. Okay. What I'm trying to do now is stop freelancing around so much on this thing and focus down on one side at a time, one part at a time. I have a bad habit, you've probably noticed it if you've watched any of my streams, where I will kind of go spastic. I don't want to use that word. I will kind of go a little bit unpredictable and disorganized and disheveled with my general painting area. And that's actually not good, because then things start drying unevenly, you forget where you left off. You don't remember where one like layer ends and where another begins, which leads to oddly shaped layers. It's definitely better to have a little bit more control and restraint when you're painting, unless you are specifically going for that style. And I think that's a big part of it in general, is in education with this kind of stuff, is, you know, yes, do your own thing, but the best way to learn how to do your own thing is to learn how it's supposed to be done, quote unquote, and then learn how the thing you do bends the rules, and that way you can more effectively do thing. Hey Snow Twig, how's it going? Because right now, that's what I'm kind of doing, is I'm going helter-skelter all over the place, and it's creating a lot of problems with the thickness of the layers. And if I had a more methodical approach, he probably would be a whole lot more evenly coated right now. But that's neither here nor there. So what's going to happen now is I'm going to continue painting him in this neat maroon color. Going okay, how's the painting? It's going fine. Thanks for asking. I am right now painting through Griffin Simmons on the Warthog. And unfortunately, because I used a color that goes on really thick and chalky, that texture is showing through their color layers, which is not what I wanted. And so I'm going to have to find a workaround to that. But in general, I think it's going to look fine once I get a wash over these guys and get a highlight, because those will detract from the texturing that's being caused right now by my subpar underpainting job. At least that is the hope. But yeah, I've already gotten a layer of this stuff on Griff, the driver, and now I'm working to get a layer of it on Simmons, the gunner, so that I can go back and touch up to a second layer, which should clean a lot of this up. I will say, and this should tell you how inexperienced I am with art in general, I was completely unaware that maroon is a combination of brown and red. In my mind, I think I was thinking closer to magenta, and so I was going to start mixing like purple into the red and do what that gave me. But that makes a completely different color, so shame on me. Don't need that on there. Yeah, so we're going to mix some more of this red into more of this brown. That was really watered down. That's not good. Don't want all that water in the paint. We're going to see how this goes. Hopefully, the second layer of painting, the second coat, will be a much nicer, smoother one that won't have so many of the imperfections underneath. Yeah, that's leaning more into red. There we go. That's leaning into that darker purple that I want. Or that darker maroony color. I was unaware of it, but apparently if you want to just use primary colors to make a maroon, you get like 5-to-1 mix of blue to red, and then you add yellow to it. Which I thought was a very strange combination of things, but I guess it makes sense. But this is why I don't know color theory, because I was never educated on this beyond like an elementary schooler's understanding, and that was over almost 30 years ago. So I'm kind of having to relearn this on the fly as I'm attempting to paint this man. That's a little bit too reddish for my liking. Let's add some more of that brown in there. And actually, you can kind of see it on some spots of him where there's weird pushy gaps on it. I was talking about that earlier and how that's generally bad. That's why you want to be really careful with how much water you get into your paints, because if you push around wet paint, it ends up leaving these weird holes in the paint job that you then have to cover up. And that's not the easiest thing in the world to do. So hopefully I can do a convincing enough job that when someone looks at this mini, they understand, oh, it's Griffin Simmons from Red vs. Blue. I'm old enough to remember that show. And they'll like recognize it immediately. Okay. What's next? I think in there is good. And then a little bit of that. And we're going to have to do all of his leg, because apparently I forgot to do all of the inside of his left leg. Okay. And yeah, so there's Griff or Simmons mostly done. He's going to need one more layer of paint when I get back to him. But in general, this is what Simmons is going to look like color-wise, and I think it does a pretty darn good job of color matching to what he looked like in the show with the maroon set of power armor from Halo. Something I thought was kind of cool was a technological thing they did in Red vs. Blue. There's a scene in, I believe, the 3rd season. I don't remember which season's which anymore, because it's been forever since I've watched it. But one of the things that they had to do to get Griffin Simmons on the Warthog together was they actually composited 2 shots together, because in the original Halo 1 engine, you couldn't put two Master Chiefs, 2 players of different colors on the same vehicle. And so they would only ever shoot them from one side, so you could only either see Griff driving or Simmons shooting, or if they were able to get them, or needed to show them both there, they would have like a side shot like this, and they would kind of chop it so that they would have like Simmons being driven around by a random bot, and then they would cut the back half of that picture, and they'd have Griff being driven, or Griff driving around, and they would cut the front half of that picture, and they would put them together to make Griff and Simmons be on the same vehicle. And in one of the parts, I believe it's the one where after they get blown into the future by a bomb, which is a very silly idea, to show that that was no longer a restriction, they had Griff get in the passenger seat while Simmons was driving it or something, and Simmons yells at him, and then he jumps back out. But it was just to show the audience that, hey, we can do this now. This is now a thing that Bungie put in, and we can take advantage of this as part of our show. I need more brown. And I just thought that was a neat little thing that they did to demonstrate the technology of Halo 2. Okay. And actually, yeah, now that he's got a good, decent layer over all of him, he looks pretty darn good. He's going to end up needing some more color depth, and I'm going to need to put some black where, like, some of the webbing is showing through and the other accents are. But as far as a passable Simmons clone, he looks like a passable Simmons clone. So now, back to Griff. And what I actually think I want to do with Griff is I think I want to add some red to the orange to deepen it a little bit, and then work my way back to a brighter orange, because this orange is already a light orange, and it's very luminescent. It's very bright. Not luminescent, it's not giving off light. But I mean, when you look at it, you can see it's a very, very bright orange. And even though I've got it on here, I should not have put it on here this thick, even though I've got it on here, and I've got one decent layer on this guy, the coverage is still not the best, which is one of the big problems with orange. So I think I'll give it one more shot, and if I'm not satisfied with the coverage, I'm going to go back and repaint him with a mixture of orange and red. Because, like, especially, you can still see where a lot of the previous color is poking through, and that's not what I'm looking for. I don't normally paint things orange for this specific reason. The only time I've really found myself using my bright orange, to be honest, is... Thanks, I appreciate it. I'm glad that you like it. Because I know for a fact I can be overcritical of my own stuff. But as I look at it, I can clearly see like the layers of green that were spray painted on, and the buff that was used as a base coat kind of poking out, and it's really, really obvious to me. But then again, I am not the target customer. If someone else can look at this model and doesn't see that, then I don't need to worry. But anyway, what was I saying? I forgot what I was saying. Nope, it's gone. Whatever it was, it's gone. So you got me out of that little overly critical spiral. But what's going to be good, I think, and this will help provide some more depth, is I'm going to highlight him with a yellow. And he's going to get a red wash as well, which should do a pretty decent job of giving him some nice shadows. Because I think the red of the wash will do a good job of like unifying and deepening the orange a little bit. Which is kind of what I'm hoping for. Yeah, now I'm looking at Simmons. Simmons looks fantastic. A little bit on that elbow, a little bit down here, and there's some pretty clear spots where I got a little liberal with the orange paint, and it is on the console, on other bits and bobs. But the good news is, or not the orange paint, the original base coat, is that I've got a black paint that I can just go in there with and pop it. I'm not going to do that now as I'm in the middle of painting. I don't want to mess myself up, but gosh, they're going to be bright against this this very militaristic drab vehicle. Hopefully, I'll be able to tone it down just a little bit. I don't want to kill off the entire vibrancy of them, but I definitely want them to be a little less loud. And I think given that I have a basis in quote-unquote grimdark style, I should be able to knock this down very simplistically with like a wash and a little bit of a shade. Yeah, that orange is actually looking a whole lot better. Hitting it with that second layer covered up a lot of the mistakes that I was not too happy with a second ago. Some of this stuff. There's the problem. There's your problem. I think another problem is I need to change out my wet palette. It's getting on there in age, or getting up there in age, and it's starting to have a hard time being a good surface for my paint job or for my paints. Which is fine. I have abused the bejesus out of this wet palette sheet, and it doesn't surprise me at all that it's finally starting to give out. That tends to happen, but thankfully they're very inexpensive. Yeah, and now both of these fine gentlemen look pretty good. I think I need to get a little bit more underneath Simmons because it looks like I missed a spot. And now it is not a problem. Simmons is good. To be honest, because I was so aggressive with that first coat, there's not a whole lot on Simmons that needs to be repainted. His first coat ended up having much better coverage because the red that I used had much better coverage. Right now, I'm just going back over and hitting spots that I don't think I hit at all. Okay. Yeah, no, he's ended up looking pretty good. I don't have a whole lot more to do with him. Okay. Now the next step for these guys is definitely going to be to use a much finer tip brush and do some actual detail work on them, because right now they're both kind of bland, you know what I mean? There's a lot more that can be done to them to make them look more interesting than just orange marine and maroon marine. So that will be my next stop on this journey. And that includes things like painting the belts, painting the Aquila, which, like I said, I think I'm just going to do as a red to signal that they are red team. getting their eye lenses, which I'm going to try and match up to what I think was the goldish color from Halo. Stuff like that. But they're looking pretty good, so I think I'm not going to leave it at this, but I think that I'm happy with how they look. Get a little bit more on Simmons, because I keep finding little spots, like little shadows that I've missed, that really stick out to me. So, actually, this is why you keep inspecting your mini after you claim you're done, because the very act of claiming you're done is going to open up even more spots and more spaces and more things that you didn't hit. Okay. Yeah. I refuse to believe that Griff is orange. I keep seeing it. Like, I see Griff. I see him in the wiki, and I see what he supposedly looks like in some of the newer seasons. But he just does not look orange. I mean, this is obviously a very ridiculous Kraft macaroni and cheese type of orange. But Griff in the show does not look orange. And I mean, they did actually create a character who was yellow specifically to show the difference between the orange and the yellow sprites in game, or the yellow models. But my goodness, is it very different. The yellow in Halo 1 is almost like a pale gold in comparison. This brush is all kinds of effed up. One moment. I've got strands going everywhere. I've got a tip that is now completely messed up. This brush is pretty bad. I wonder if I can roll it a little bit. Nope, that didn't do much. That's fine, I guess. I'm just going to be a little lazy. Yeah, as soon as I took this brush to the model, the tip split again. So I think this brush is about done. I'm going to use it a little more. I'll tempt the fates since Simmons' color is so much closer. And I'm just going to go ahead and hit like the large part of the Aquila on Simmons. And then I'll switch over to a much more detailed brush for doing the rest of the Aquila. There we go. Okay, onto a brush I'm not trying to do. How about that? Scoop up some more of that red. A brush with an actual tip. See what I can do about hitting all the spots the bigger brush missed. Which actually isn't a bigger brush, they're the same size. It's just that one of them has clearly been through the ringer, while the other one I'm still trying to be delicate with. Though I am starting to believe that I'm just rough on brushes and I don't know how to take care of them, because I keep hearing stories about how people have their brush and it maintains like a perfect tip for a really long time. And meanwhile, I seem to go through a brush every few weeks. Like, I can't seem to keep one going for longer than about a month. And it's led me to believe that maybe I just shouldn't ever buy a quality brush again. Because Winsor & Newton brushes are expensive, and I really don't want to spend $20 a month or $40 a month or whatever getting these very expensive brushes. Next on the list, oh man, Simmons, your face. Wait, no, not coming. Simmons' helmets and his armpits are definitely not looking kosher. There's still pockets of that khaki coming through. Okay, next on the list, probably gotta go ahead and paint the Aquila red too, just to match. Show that they're team red. I know that that's not a thing in Red vs. Blue, or in Halo, they don't have Aquilas. or whatever, but we're gonna go ahead and do that. I actually don't remember. Do they have eagles or eagle symbolism for I don't even remember what they're called because I did not play a lot of Halo. The humans. Did they have any of that stuff? I honestly do not know. Behold the power of a fine-tipped brush. Heck yeah. This is why you keep one good brush on you, folks. That way you can do cool stuff like that. Nice, precise. Nice, precise. Okay. Relatively quiet stream, but I think it's about time for me to go ahead and hop off. It's about 6:30. I need to get dinner. I need to stretch out my neck a little bit. Thanks for joining me, for those of you who are here. I really do appreciate it. It's Thursday, so I'm not going to be streaming tomorrow, I don't believe, but I guess I will see you guys later. Thanks again for stopping by, and have a good rest of your day. Bye-bye.